This is still what trying forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Guys, go sit down. Hi. Thank you. Please, I'll probably catch a cold. Ah, yeah. Hi. Rochelle. Hi. That was good. Yeah. This is our, we were on with them, bowling team from JK from Freeman Golden. Hi, yeah. Thank you. Oh, hi, Madison. Nice to meet you.
He's got a great beard.
Oh.
I was thinking, so sad.
Hi, Arby. Judy, of course. You have to explain who you are.
The three amigos.
Sorry about my buddy.
Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment we're going to begin the funeral services of Mr. Robert Mintz. I invite everybody to please to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off. Rabbi Aaron Braun from Northbrook Community Synagogue will be officiating. And just as a last and gentle reminder, please be sure your phones have been turned off.
gonna cut free like that, so a little bit like this. Here, let me take your verse. We're starting this.
Thank you. I got that. Yep. We begin today with the Psalm, Tehillim Tet Vav, Psalm 15. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai mi yagor be'olecha, mi yishkon bahar kadshecha. A song of David, Lord, who may sojourn in your tent, who may dwell on your holy mountain. Holech tamim ufoel, tzedek v'dover emet belevavo. One who walks in purity does what is righteous, and speaks the truth from the heart. Lo ragal al lishono, lo asa l're'ehu ra'a, v'cherpa lo nasa al krovo. Who has no slander on the tongue, nor has done harm to a fellow, nor cast disgrace towards a neighbor. Nivzeh be'einav, nimas v'et yirei Adonai yechabed, nishba lahara v'lo yamir. In whose eyes a contemptible person is repulsive, but who honors those who are in awe of the Lord, who swears truthfully, even to personal hurt, and never retracts. Kaspo lo natan beneshech, v'shochad al naki lo lakach, ose'ele lo yemot leolam. Who does not lend money on interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. One who does these things shall never falter. Tehillim Kuf Lamed, Psalm 130. Shir Amalot Mimamakim Karaticha Adonai. A song of ascents out of the depths I call you, Lord. Adonai Shema Bekoli Tiyenu Uznecha Kashuvot Lekol Tachanunai. Lord, listen to my cry. Let your ears be attentive to my supplicative plea. Im avonot tishmarya Adonai mi ya'amod. If you preserve the account of sins, God, Lord, who can survive? Ki imcha haslicha laman tivare. Pardon resides with you so that you are held in awe. Kiviti Adonai kifta nafshi v'lidvaro halchalti. Hope for the Lord, my soul hopes. I await God's word. Nafshi la Adonai mishmarim laboker shamrim laboker. I yearn more for the Lord than guards for the morning guard for the morning. Yachel Yisrael el Adonai ki im Adonai chesed v'harbe imo fdut. Israel, wait for the Lord, for with the Lord is kindness and great redemption. V'hu yifteh et Yisrael mikol avonotav. And it is God who will redeem Israel from all its iniquities. It is always difficult to join together to say goodbye to a loved one, especially today, as Bob had been so healthy and so happy. It was only in August, I'm told, that the first signs that something wasn't right had appeared, and now here we are just 3 months later. Daniel mentioned to me when I met with the family yesterday that he had only really retired last year. This was to be his joyful twilight years of retirement. He was to have this time to enjoy and relax. It seems as though at 85, Bob was far too young and quick to leave us. I am comforted to know that he made the most of his time here. He really worked hard and played hard. He showed love and gave everything he had, be that time, money, or just the encouragement that many of you received from him. For me, it was his place in shul and his demeanor. I'll speak more about that in a moment, but he was really and truly one of a kind. This moment, here today, marks our time to ensure that his memory is not lost or wasted, God forbid. Rather, we are to share the stories, share the memories of Bob. They may be sad and difficult to tell or hilarious and fun to share, but tell all of your memories. Share what he was like and the time you spent with him. In that way, his memory lives on, and he will never be forgotten. In that way, we all get to carry him forward into our lives, knowing he made us all a little better. Born Robert Paul to Max and Shirley Mintz in Chicago at Michael Reese Hospital on Wednesday, March 24th, 1937, he would grow up the younger brother of Leta, who was 4 when he was born. The family would move to various homes during Bob's childhood, one in Albany Park, where he would attend the Volta Elementary School, and eventually to the Austin neighborhood. His parents both worked. Max was in sales of liquor, sales of insurance, whatever could be sold. Shirley worked in the accounting department for the city of Chicago next to Daley Plaza. Bob would attend Austin High School off Pine and Fulton and would eventually graduate in 1955. From there, Bob found his way to the Pierre campus of the University of Illinois. He would only spend the first 2 years of college there, transferring to the University of Illinois in Champaign to finish up his final 2 years. Bob was a dedicated student and made the most of his college years. I understand he began working while he was still in school to help pay for the cost of his education. He would graduate in 1959 with a degree in accounting and made the most of it, passing his CPA exam on the very first try. Bob went to work for J.K. Lasser, but maintained a social life as well. He had kept involvement with staffing at Camp Shy, and at a planning meeting at the Bernard Horwich JCC in 1961, his life would change forever. He was, completely unaware of it at the time. A number of kids had met at the JCC, and it was mentioned that the bus to camp wasn't running that year, but some guy named Bob Mintz had a car. InaBeth took note. It was at Camp Shy that year that she introduced herself. It was all history from there. And for those curious, I asked, it was a red Ford Falcon. In any case, on March 30th, 1963, they were married at the Ambassador West Hotel in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. Bob and InaBeth would move to 2411 Balmoral in the Budlong Woods neighborhood of Chicago. It was there in 1965 that David was born. The family would then move to 8135 Keating in Skokie, where in 1966 Daniel would join the family. The family would then decide to build a house in Northbrook sometime later at 2548 Woodlawn Road. It came with a 6-month stint living with Bob's sister Leta in Melrose Park while the house in Northbrook was being built. I can only imagine the chaos in that home. 2 years after the move to Northbrook, Eve would arrive and the family was complete. The kids would grow up in Northbrook, and Bob would join Barry Goldberg and Ron Friedman to create what would eventually become FGMK. Bob was successful, but humble. He cared more about his family and being there to support them. He was an avid genealogy buff as well. Before there were online programs and apps, before there was 23andMe or Ancestry.com, there was Bob. He went back generations and generations. He contacted family overseas and eventually found whole sections of the family that had been separated by the Holocaust and thought to have been gone. Bob would plan and execute the family reunion in 1987, and then about every 4 to 5 years following. There was 1992 in LA and 96 back at Leta's. The family was huge. There was always a theme to the reunions. Softball games included family from New Zealand and France, Israel, and the United States. Bob made sure each attendee had a custom tree of how they fit into the family. Unbelievable. Bob was a reader. He loved books. But it was more than the huge books that he often read, I'm told. He also read the Chicago Sun-Times every morning. And when we say he read it, he read every single word. He would likewise read the Wall Street Journal. Bob was also a history buff, which informed his love for genealogy. It was history plus family. He had a great sense of humor and a huge Cubs fan. I suppose those two things have to come together, humor and the Cubs. But he got to see them win the World Series finally. Bob liked the experiences too. He took the family to a Final Four in New Orleans, games at Wrigley, where he would always score the game, and he drove them downtown to celebrate when the '85 Bears won the Super Bowl. He saw a Bulls championship in person as well. He loved movies, especially the old-time movies with the likes of Cary Grant, and he held season tickets to the theater for years. They always attended, even the worst shows, of which there were a few. Bob loved burning hot coffee, especially Dunkin' Donuts, as well as burnt food. He played tennis and racquetball very competitively and loved every minute of it. But mostly, at least by frequency, Bob and InaBeth loved to travel. They visited, I'm told, I believe 28 countries. In fact, when I met with the family, Ina thought it was easier and quicker to list the countries they hadn't visited. They went to Israel 3 times, including once with the whole family. They went for 16 years back and forth to Scottsdale every February, to the Gainey Suites, and to the Wisconsin Dells for Bob's 80th birthday party. The family also co-owned a home in Nippersink, Wisconsin for a period of time. Bob was a great accountant, and he worked very hard. But none of it was worth it if he couldn't enjoy the times with family and seeing the world. I understand that at one point Bob even brought his family into the business, bringing Eve in to work as an accountant at the firm. Papa Bob liked to be with his grandkids as well, whether with Max and Savannah, Jake, and Olivia. He was always present in the moment. He would read books to them, but extremely detailed books about the world, including a book about Princess Diana to Olivia. Bob was generous with his money and his time. He wanted to bring joy, whether with a book read or a jet ski given to a teenager still in college. There are tons more stories, from the pictures on real film cameras only, to the flowers at weddings, or to his wife just because. And I encourage each of you to ask the family about all of the stories and share your stories with them. Bob lived quite a life, and his life deserves to be told. For me, Bob was one of a kind. He sat where no one ever sits in shul. He sat every year on the high holidays in the very front row, center stage. I have to tell you, I've joked many times in my shul that we only have a front row so that people know where not to sit. Bob and InaBeth were the exception. They have always wanted to be up front and present. Bob's dedication and smile will be with me for a lifetime. Every time I got off the bima at the end of services, he'd give me just the biggest bright smile. There was always words of encouragement too, like, "Nice job, Rabbi," or something to that effect. We missed him this year, and his absence will leave an entire row empty. He will be missed by all who knew him. This week, in synagogues around the world, congregations will read from the Torah portion known as Chaye Sarah. Chaye Sarah tells of the passing of Sarah, Avraham's wife. But it tells more about Abraham and how he sets out to ensure that his family has a future. Abraham gave his whole life, his whole self, to those around him and those he loved. Even when wounded, he thought of others first. When grieving, his first thought is how he will find someone as good to him like Sarah was for his son Isaac. Abraham always thought of those around him first. I couldn't help this morning but thinking that this was Bob. He gave everything for his family. He wanted to be sure each of you had a good head on your shoulders and had the opportunity that life could provide. May you have the success that he did. May you read as much as Bob did, if that's even possible. May you surround yourself with family and friends and always support each other as Bob supported you. May you travel the world, but always stay grounded. And may the memory of Robert Paul Mintz, Yerachmiel Pinchas ben Mordechai be an everlasting blessing. At this point, I want to share a few words of his oldest grandson, Max. My Papa Bob was an amazing person. More important, he was my best friend. I remember coming over for sleepovers and having wonderful dinners, watching cartoons, and snacking on popcorn and milkshakes. I couldn't wait to see him and spend time with him. I would often call over and ask if he could take me to a fire station and get me different model emergency vehicles. I remember we would have to stop at a Dunkin' Donuts if we saw one. My Papa Bob introduced me to coffee milk and would have it every time I was over instead of me going out and hanging out with my friends on weekends. I wanted to go see my Papa. When I would stay over before going to bed, I would look over and see him doing math puzzles, and I would see how smart he was. He would often show me new kinds of snacks to try, such as the peanut donut, and those would end up being my favorite. I remember not too long ago, I would talk about world issues and crime and how I wanted to fix it, and would talk and would talk about fire department things. He would always listen to me when everyone else was tired of me talking about it. I can't thank you enough for all these memories. You truly meant so much to me. I just wish I had more time with you. I love you and will never forget you and what you did for me. At this point, I'd like to invite up Marc Weingardt, Bob's son-in-law and Max's father.
Getting on. These. Like the rabbi said, Bob Mintz always took great pleasure in the happiness of others, especially when it came to his family. Perhaps that's why he decided to take his family on a cruise over winter break 34 years ago. That's when I first met Bob. He was wearing one of those motion sickness patches behind his ear, so clearly this trip wasn't his idea. That decision to go on that trip led to a chance encounter that would forever change our lives. I would meet his daughter, Eve, from Northbrook, of all places, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Months later, while touring prospective colleges, during a layover in Kansas City, Bob once again decides to get off the plane with Eve and call me. I immediately went to the airport, picked him up, and gave him an extensive tour at the University of Kansas. Later that year, Eve would enroll at the University of Kansas with me. That spring, Bob invited me down to Hallandale, Florida, to be with Eve. He taught me all about Highlight. Never knew what that was. It was interesting. And he took me to a thrift market, like a flea market, one of the biggest ones there was. And as we're walking through the flea market, one of the vendors starts calling out, "Hey, skinny boy, hey, skinny boy." Well, Bob thought that was hysterical, so for the next however many years, 30 years, I was skinny boy. That was my new nickname. Bob loved to travel, as we mentioned earlier, and at some juncture, we started to spend vacations together, our family along with the Mintzes. It was on one of these vacations that I told Bob that I wanted to marry his daughter. He immediately cried with tears of joy, though I'm still not sure it was because he was gaining a son or losing a credit card expense. Bob was very meticulous and precise. It was his nature. I mean, what kind of person does math puzzles for pleasure? Though at times his precise nature could be difficult, his seders, brutal. God forbid we skip a page. And by the time it was over, you felt like you had just come out of bondage. I was emptying sand out of my shoes. Bob was also very unassuming. It was never about him. He would rather spend his money on his family than himself. He would rather spend time with his family and his grandkids. Especially once the first one arrived, Max, he almost became obsessive. There was a point in time when he almost moved next door to us. Didn't happen. Scary stuff. Bob and my son Max, as you heard, became very close and had a special bond. When most kids were out running around, getting into trouble and chasing girls, Max was hanging out with Papa Bob, going to firehouses, hitting the Dunkin' Donut circuit. But every Hanukkah, we'd gather at his house, and he'd have 8 presents for each child and each grandchild. And we'd sit in the room, and we'd take turns opening them. And they weren't just gift cards. These were very thoughtful, personal gifts. Bob was also unassuming in other ways, too. He was perhaps one of the best racquetball players and tennis players, despite having flat feet. I never could figure that out. I never could beat him. Bob was always loving, kind, generous, and he didn't have a mean bone in his body. And if he didn't have something nice to say about something or someone, he would just say, "Eh."
I'd like to invite up Daniel and Jill Mintz to share a few words.
First of all, I would like to thank you all for joining us today to honor my dad, Robert Paul Mintz. It is very difficult for me to be up here right now, and giving this speech is something that I knew I might have to do someday, but I just didn't think it would come so soon. How do I sum up my dad in a few words? The answer is I can't. He was first and foremost a great son to Max and Shirley Mintz, and a great little brother to Leta, Loizzo. He was a devoted husband to my mom, InaBeth Mintz. He was the most wonderful dad to David, Evie, and me. He was also a very generous Papa Bob to his grandchildren, Max and Savannah Weingardt, and Jake and Olivia Mintz. We had the kind of childhood that included vacations, trips to Florida to see Grandpa Max and Grandma Shirley, endless summers spent at Nippersink. There was also the serious side of my dad. He and my mom were disciplinarians, and they instilled the value of hard work and respect for one another. His guidance, support, unconditional love, and the unwavering strength has made me the man I am today. To my mom, the other half of this dynamic duo, she has the most treasured memories of any of us, but they belong to her alone. None of us knew or loved or treasured my dad as she did. So today we give your memories to hold in your heart. As I work my way through this grief, I am reminded that life is precious. There are no do-overs. You must have no regrets. Tell your loved ones, I love you, before you don't have that chance. Dad, I love you more than words can describe. You will be sorely missed every day, and a piece of my broken heart will always be with you. Here's to Robert Paul Mintz, the wisest and funniest man I have ever known.
This is a poem I wrote last night, and I wasn't sure if I would have the courage to stand up in front of people because it's not my strong suit, but for him, I will try my best. I met a man a while ago. He was called Bob when we first said hello. He was funny, nice, a good fellow, I thought. Little did I know how much he taught. As time went on, the closer we got, we would talk about life, history, and the arts. Then came the time and engagement to Dan, marrying his son, who is a great man. The sands in the hourglass quickly fell. No way to stop it, no more life to fulfill. This man has been through the good and the bad. I am proud to say. He went from Bob to being my dad. Thank you.
We continue with Psalm 23, Tehillim Chaf Gimel. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar. Bino deshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yanahaleni. Nashi yeshovev yancheni v'magle tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech begetz al mave lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha hema yanachamuni. Taroch lefanai shochan neged sorarai tishanta vashemen roshi. Kosi rivayai. Ach tov chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti v'veit Adonai leorech yamim. We join together in the English inside the service booklet, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Please rise as we say a memorial prayer. Mele rachamim, shochein bamromi, hametzei menucha nechona, al kanfei hashchina, b'mahalot kedoshim utehorim, kezarakia mazhirim, et nishmat Yerachmiel Pinchas ben Mordechai shahalach le'olamo. Bavor she'anachnu mitpalelim be'ad haskarat nishmato began Eden tehei menuchato. Lachein bal harachamim yastireu b'seter kenavav la'olamim vayitzror betzror achayim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomahar Amen. God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant proper repose on the sheltering wings of your presence in the lofty levels of the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament, unto the soul of Robert Paul, the son of Max and Shirley Mintz, who is gone to his world and for whose memory we pray. May his repose be in paradise. May the Master of Compassion bring him under the cover of God's wings and bind his soul in the bond of life. May the Lord be his heritage, and may he repose on his resting place in peace. And let us respond. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, service will continue at Shalom Memorial Park, located at 1700 West Rand Road in Arlington Heights. The family will be returning to the Mintz residence at 5 Carriage Lane in Highwood. They'll be together following the interment today till 9 p.m., then Tuesday from 5 to 9 p.m. Memorial contributions in his memory to the JCC of Chicago. That information is on the service folder as well. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing many of the cars with a flag that'll be affixed to the top portion of your car. We'll have a car in the back of the funeral procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. And for your own personal safety, I strongly recommend using your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to a cemetery. The following people have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please stand next to Robert's casket. Gerald Gold, Olivia Mintz, Jake Mintz, Max Weingardt, Marc Weingardt, Erwin Magid, and Ivan Burke. This time I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Mr. Robert Mintz to the chapel along with his family. Pallbearers are just going to follow. InaBeth, please come with your children.
Where is Olivia? Oh,
Sure. We will leave Olivia out. You can cover it. Ladies and gentlemen, you may return to your cars.